sort of sure there'll be some interesting working with Mr. Reader, Mr. Becker, and revenue proposals, and those are not ready at this point, but I would expect that our next meeting or next session share my thoughts, and at least it'll give the conversation a starting point. So with that, Mr. Reader.
Okay, I would like to just change things. Yeah, just if I would make it easy for council. We're going to start out with two of you. But keeping it easier for us. Starting off with the governing body, which is budget. It's up. That's increased slightly from last year. A few of them, but there's no significant change in that. Taking into account the mandatory items that need to be covered in the question, I'll go on to the this is legal departments, attorneys outside counsel. This is the majority of the fee. There are other sections that get charged part of the fee on the water tour, which is your vice president does not complete fee. I did cut this one to about $5,000, trying to reduce our budget deficit. We'll make a very, very concerted effort to reduce this. I think there's a way to cut that much money out of these things. I did this in conjunction with the corporate council. Comment? I was just going to ask how you were projecting, but let me not talk about that later. Yeah, a lot of things are working in progress, but we're going to need to be more efficient with staff and not calling them every little thing. Some of our day-to-day stuff is smoothing out, so we shouldn't rely on it so much as what we're trying to past. Obviously, the problem is done its way, but most of that come out of specific thanks to what thing. So I would love to have that more customer comes in for this new development. Board commission, Jeff, working on this one. Slight increase overall. These budgets to try to get them in line with what they were coming. And what the needs are. The next one's the clerks. Morgan has her budget very flat. Biggest increase in the salary to 175 and the salary everything else is pretty much flat to where this one is. So my budget, the city administrator's budget, changed a little bit. The biggest change there is we have new art coming on, complete valid items, and I took out of the budget the HR person in the valid items. So I had to eliminate that. Have it in the current year's budget and yet to fill it. But I just took that out of the budget. To balance the budget. Everything else is essentially flat versus what I like to. And then, finances are like they're about the same. We reduce costs to less than outlays. Yeah, the biggest difference between the salary and your for last year, we put $25,000 in there for merit increases. If the council went with that, we removed that this year, so that makes up most of the difference. The other thing is a little reduction in other operating expense and screening, which is similar with some of the other. No, that's myself, Teresa Durham, our HR director, would be in there, and Lisa Picaro, any training she would be doing. And for example, with Lisa, we've wanted her to get FOIA training, so that's where that would come out of. And obviously, Teresa Durham has certifications with her HR, plus the training that I would go to. That should conclude all the major budget line items. Guess we could. You want to briefly go over it?
I didn't know. Are the bulb cells in here? Those things?
The what?
Bulb cells.
The bulb cells, yes, there is a line item for bulb cells. It's in hotel, motel. Step 1 or 2.
Looking at Camp Street TIF, you'll see majority,
What page?
page 34. Majority of that is going to be bond and other debt payments. There is some engineering fees in there. Particularly, that's going to be the roundabout. There's also some legal fees. And then you'll see the property tax expense for Bass Pro Shop is in there as well. Otherwise, that one. And on the West Washington TIF, again, it's mostly debt. There's a little bit of other operating expenditures, which pertains mostly around here at City Hall. And then there are a little bit in there for engineering fees and legal fees that may be needed within the TIF. But that's, again, it's pretty similar to last year's.
Just so everybody knows, it takes a couple of years for any buildings that are built on here as far as revenue from a taxing standpoint to see increases. So, we will start seeing either in this budget, if this or the function, and then us, because we're a year behind in taxes, so you know, when you have big buildings come up and they're operational, you don't get the revenue that quickly.
Would you mind, I know under the Washington Street TIF, and the question was posed last week, you know, why there's a shortfall compared to the conversations we had a week prior to, and I see that MCB loan Camp Street TIF for 572. Can you explain that?
Yes.
So everyone, I don't know who I spoke to, I know you shared it with me, but.
So what happened in the prior year, that Camp Street TIF loan, and I shouldn't talk Camp Street TIF, but the Camp Street loan they did for the property purchase was, for some reason, being paid out of line item 201 and 231, which is labeled 2012 ABCD bond interest. So last year when we went through the budget process, all we put in there was the 2012 A, B, C, and D bonds, interest and principal payments. And this year, upon review, I identified that that actually included the MCB loan as well, which is now broken out on a separate line item, just so that won't get overlooked again or missed.
Thank you.
Yep.
It was a cost that we missed in the budget that we had to incur.
Right. And I guess my point in bringing that up, so everybody understands, I know every single department, you know, was under the same scrutiny to cut, and then all of a sudden that came out of left field and that created an additional hole that we weren't anticipating. So just want to make sure everybody has a clear understanding where that came from.
Right before that, I thought we had a balanced budget, or between $2 one way or another of a balanced budget, and then obviously with something that size.
Yeah. Thanks. And then if you want to look at page 44, we have the Riverboat Gaming Tax. We're going to leave the revenue flat on that one again as far as budget at 4.5. We're looking to exceed that this year is what we budgeted, but we still had a decrease in the prior year. And talking to Jeff and Commissioner Bensberger, we wanted to be a little conservative and keep that down at that 4.5. As I don't know if we've seen the bottom yet as far as the revenue. As far as capital, police, fire, you'll see all of those have been removed, and it's basically just a payment to Peoria, and then there's going to be a loan back to the TIF to help offset that debt.
What's the actual on gaming revenue as compared to what the budget was?
Through January, we are currently $148,000 above budget.
Okay.
But we are, I don't have it with me, I need to number on what we are behind last year. We're still significantly behind prior year.
Okay.
What looks like to happen to the so last year was 400
just
probably behind the like it's 3 months behind. That was in the first we did the drop was stopped. Actually, we have to stop. With respect to taxes on this, that Mr. Russell paid, asking if we can do it. Tax collection for 8% of what we're going to and housing for Japanese. We start thinking about how the folks are supposed to do it. Before we get to any other questions on the expense side of other look at this. Processing to think about how much that's supposed to take out of the seems about $140,000 left. Hopefully, because I'm sure the state continues on what's going to happen, but for me, just the state improvement budget that often includes additional funds that improvements. State has a budget. I don't understand looking at this. I understand what 1% of investors elsewhere say along the world sales tax. I believe it's what we have projected that coming on board, and not necessarily that 2% to the first tax, collection is the first tax, and not the charges and things like that.
We've cut what we feel that we can cut. A lot of it's very painful, and some of the items are needed, or a lot of the items are needed that were cut out of the budget. With the direction of not to cut staff, so we didn't touch any staff positions or bodies. The person that was cut out of the budget was the HR person, which I hadn't filled in the current year's budget. Now we have no capital spending. We're not buying any vehicles. We're not spending anything over and above minimal maintenance on our city buildings. We need to either discuss what programs need to be cut or the revenue options. We've already discussed in the past a couple of the revenue options. Where we decided not to go for the sales tax back in October. When I first brought this up, that is still an option. Revenue. We did discuss some other ideas. I think every department would like to raise their fees, from building department to building permit fees to the public works and some of the fees they charge for development, say as a water tap-on fee, but they're all small dollar figures. Altogether, I don't think that the increase would be, $20,000 to $25,000. And on the permit fees, that's if people still build buildings. That's a big question mark. Are we going to have a good construction season or not? Everything indicates that we are going to have another good construction season. with some projects coming forward. No one super big one, but there's a lot of the little stuff that we traditionally see still going forward.
So you're saying to us that you believe you've cut to the point where it's going to be difficult to cut any more, so we need to look at what revenue sources we're going to utilize to make up the difference.
That's correct. And there are some instances where it's questioned whether we have enough supplies and materials for some people to do the job that they need to do. I'm not comfortable in cutting things like fuel, things like medicine for the ambulances. You know, those are expenses we have to do our jobs. And we've cut and done all the cost savings that we can. We're continuing to look at cost savings measures, but there's no big items out there to cut.
Just to let everybody know, I met with Dennis and Jeff and Rick on Monday, talked about the streets, and Patrick Meyer was there as well. Looked at an overview of the streets. It's been too long since I've had an overview for the council, so we plan on doing that next Tuesday at 5. Is that correct, Jeff? 5 o'clock next Tuesday? It's all-encompassing. Again, I'll tell you everything that we know today. Patrick's going to be here as well.
You've shared this type of information with them in the past, so it's just an update on our street ratings.
Yeah.
You'll see how they've changed.
I can answer questions if you have them tonight. However, be a much better presentation next week.
Well, it sounds like the options for revenue you're saying are what?
There's only two options, or real options for dollars. One's a sales tax increase. Different numbers have been discussed: a quarter cent, a half cent. The half cent is where my recommendation would be. The second item is a garbage fee. And together with both of those, we can have a rather modest capital spending program. Nothing major, because first thing you have to do is you have to take the little over $500,000 to cover the current budget. One of the big items from my standpoint, and talking to you guys would be as well, is our financial reserves. We have a very slim financial reserves that we need to increase over time. And then we have a lot of capital needs among all departments.
So your garbage fee will be what, and does it include yard waste?
The garbage fee that we've been looking at is $15 a month. It still would be the lowest in the area. Yes, it does include yard waste, although I am not 100% confident in my numbers with the yard waste because we've never done it. I don't know how much volume is going to be picked up, and so I don't know what my disposal cost on that's going to be. It's very hard for me to budget those numbers since we've never done that before. Unlike garbage and recycling, it's much easier for me to figure out what my costs would be on those. Obviously, it's still much cheaper to recycle than to take stuff to the landfill. So anything we can move from garbage to recycling is a win for us from a financial perspective. And our garbage fees by contract will be going up 3.5% a year for the next, it's either 3 or 4 years.
Those are our tipping fees?
Our tipping fees will be going up 3.5%. It's either 3 or 4 more years.
Okay. That would preserve recycling.
That would go to a biweekly recycling with toters. And we would have to purchase additional arm trucks. And garbage is our current fleet of garbage trucks. We've got 2 reliable trucks that are a little over halfway through their useful life, and all the other garbage trucks, which are not equipped to have the arm, are really at their end of their useful life and are requiring a lot of maintenance to keep them on the road.
No sense of avoiding it. Who's in favor or disfavor of garbage fee?
I'm not in favor of it, and I'll tell you why. I mean, People have paid property taxes since the beginning of time in the city for that. Now, one thing that was brought up by Commissioner Decker, which was a revelation, was the fact that the city absorbed the cost to recycle.
Yeah, it was.
That was news to me. I'd never been informed of that. So that in itself kind of opens up another conversation, which...
Not only recycling. At that time where we went to the transfer station, I think we picked up more costs on solid waste, on garbage as well. Am I
Garbage
correct?
fees would have went up, your disposal tonnage fees would have went up probably pretty drastically at that particular time.
So I just wanted to lay it all out there. I think both probably increased at that time, if I'm not mistaken.
Actually, given what we've done with property taxes for the last 10 years, the city's been absorbing all increases, whether it's for all solid waste, well, really for all costs, but particularly for solid waste, for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Which is, absorbing those costs not only in solid waste, but really across the board, whether it's recycling virtually everywhere except water and wastewater. The city has been continually absorbing the cost, and we simply can't do that.
Well, it lends itself into fees. I know Robert Cole in his presentation talked about the fact that we hadn't adjusted anything in 20 years. When you look at some of those, quite honestly, we're subsidizing a lot of that stuff.
We are.
So, I mean,
And there's the point with building fees.
right.
On building fees, some of the point is you want the fees small enough so you get the inspection because you're more concerned with the inspection from a life safety point of view than you are collecting the fee because you want people to update their houses, which actually adds to the assessed value. New buildings, the same thing. So, but you're right. We've not adjusted any of those fees in a long time, and I think 2.5 years ago he tried, and council said no to increases at that time. I believe it was about 2
It was about 4 years ago.
4 years ago.
I only know because I said no as a citizen, only because of how it was presented, and it was more of a, in fairness, it was more of a wide range of things. It wasn't just focused on what he presented to us here. But at the end of the day, as you educate yourself and you look at this, you're not really doing the taxpayers any favor when you're actually costing them money. For example, I'll use electric permit. We have to pay somebody, a third party, to go out and be the inspector. Well, when we're only charging a homeowner, let's say $20, but it's costing us $35, that's tax money. I mean,
Right.
so...
Same thing on planning and zoning, your zoning fees. The cost of publication with the newspaper has gone up, sometimes to the point now where our newspaper ad costs more than the fee.
All of those fees haven't been adjusted in years, and that's something that I believe we should address in the coming budget year. But again, all of those things together, it's not big money.
Yeah, that's why I said those things.
But we do need to adjust them to cover our costs, so that it's not, again, subsidized.
Well, it's part of stopping the bleeding, quite honestly.
Yes, it is.
So should Jeff continue on with the research into the garbage fee, or should we?
I have a question or two on that. I mean, not just the garbage fee, but this is, to me, we just can't come at a year by year by year reckoning of the budget. We have things that, the same expenses year by year, whether it be streets, fire, public works, you name it, we have them. And we have discussed this, and each department has a rolling business plan to show what they need each year, throughout the next 10 years. They have a 5-year plan. I know in Public Works we sure do. 10-year plan. A lot of things they cycle, just like with fire. And the vehicles we have continue to cycle. So my question would be, we really need to look at this, I think, in a short term, yes, what can we do this year, but also, as we sat here last week, and each of the departments that presented gave a general outline, a very specific outline, really, what their general fund capital needs were. And if you pencil them all in for the next 10 years, what's that number per year?
I don't know what that number is per year. I just handed the capital. This was as it was submitted to me by departments.
It's about $3 to $4 million, and that's on the low side.
The current year's request would be a little over $7 million if all the wish list was granted. Now, it drops off, yeah, it's between 7 and 5 for the next 3 years, and then some stuff is...
Especially when, I mean, and the wild card in this is not really a wild card, as far as just the equipment, the nuts and bolts of the equipment that we have, department-wide, citywide. And then you look at the cost of streets. Streets is thrown in with public works, and I understand that, street and street maintenance. We've been told by our city engineer, and we've practiced this for best we could for the last many years, if we could spend $1.5 million, $2 million a year is where we need to be just to break even with the deterioration of our 150-some miles of streets. Commissioner Decker's addressed this quite a bit. And then we have larger maintenance things that come along, or reconstruction with our streets, such as Centennial, which may be $2 to $3 million on a rebuild. We mentioned the bridges last week, approximately $4 million a piece, and those come, and those can't be avoided unless you close the bridge, and then you don't have access to your community. That isn't going to work either. All to say is, and you've compiled this, we know we have a need of several $1 million of general fund expenses, capital expenses, that right now we don't have a dime in the budget for this year or the next 5 years set aside for that. And you mentioned reserves. How much money per year do we need to put in reserves? I know you've told me a number, but it's several $100,000 a year to get back to where we need to be.
My proposal, you know, if we get the upper income of the sales tax, would be $500,000 a year for a minimum of 5 years. We need to be having between $3 and $4 million at a minimum in our reserves for a good operation of the city.
Right.
And it's a cash flow problem as well. So,
and I think in our strategic review that we had in May, we addressed or talked about one thing, was reserves. It was part of the overall picture of a healthy city. We provide for the capital needs as well as reserves. So when you hit those bumps and those troughs of income, when you have a machine go down, whether it be in fire, where you've got several engines that are down and you've got to address them, you can't wait, you just have to do it.
correct.
And so there's a lot of reasons to have a good reserve, but that's one of them.
Yep.
Then you,
This, Commissioner, as far as we need the money, right?
I think we need the money, the dollars, and it's been driven. And I think Commissioner Decker or Dinsberger mentioned, yeah, you could say that our real estate tax levy's been held flat for 18 years, the rate, and we've not really raised the actual rate there for the last 10 as far as actual dollars, and we're less than 15% of the total tax bill. And that goes, you know, what's been set aside the last few years are not included with any increases, is giving back $1 million, $1.5 million annually to the community, and I don't think we need to apologize for that, but that's just part of it, okay? And it takes its toll. And you say, well, at what point do you say that all property taxes pay for everything in the city? It pays for about, what, 10%, 20% of the budget?
I'm not sure.
Property taxes,
In the general fund.
ironically, you could say that three of the biggest problems in the state of Illinois statewide are property tax rates, workers' comp, and public pensions. And ironically, property taxes in the city of East Peoria cover public pensions and workers' comp, and that's all. It pays for nothing else.
I think maybe we should, and this is Commissioner Decker's idea, not a garbage fee, but a refuge fee, perhaps, to change the name.
I have a question, Mayor, that I'd like to pose, and I'm kind of cautious about posing this, but I think we need to get it out on the table. And the question is more for Dennis Triggs. We want to make sure that going forward that it even would be enforceable. As I mentioned last week, I'm hesitant to agree to a garbage fee. If we turn it into a this type of fee, can we mandate the public to pay for it? If we put it along with the water bill, can people, I guess, combine with their neighbors And would we be doing ourselves any good? Can we put it on the water bill and just make it part of an overall fee? Just don't want to walk down this road and ultimately impose this fee, and then it couldn't be enforced anyway.
I'm not following Commissioner, when you say part of the overall fee or put it on the water sewer bill. It's a question really.
Can you make them pay?
Does this municipality have the authority to require the citizens to pay a solid waste collection fee?
And can they refuse? Can they say, no, I'll take care of my own garbage some other way?
Our opinion is that you have that authority in the general police bill.
Okay.
We don't operate, as you well know, in the world of absolutes.
Right, right.
You know,
Good question, though.
Yeah.
Your Honor, I was going to save this for next week because I haven't fully vetted my own thoughts, and the devil is, of course, in the details.
Yeah.
But I'll put a few, I guess, revenue thoughts out for everyone to consider. Of course, I'll call it a solid waste fee.
Good terminology.
Exactly how it will work, as Commissioner Decker just pointed out, is the devil is in the details. But as I see it, we have about 3 alternatives, and 2 of them would require them to be combined for it to work. If you did a solid waste fee that at $15 a week generates about $15 a month, I'm sorry, generates about $1.6 million. That does not entirely cover the costs of that service. However, it covers most of it, and would allow some additional money to basically take solid waste off the general fund, out of the general fund.
That would fund
It would
trucks,
cover
so-
those costs. It would allow for purchase of equipment and trucks moving forward. But I would advocate that if we do that, I believe the citizens need and would deserve something value added. I think a more robust recycling program. Mr. Eder mentioned biweekly with toters. It should include glass.
Which it can. We've been told that we can recycle glass.
That we can,
We can.
yes. I would also advocate that we need to include yard waste in that. Yard waste is basically a 6-month collection, and we've talked about the value of perhaps whoever would man that would then be available for other duties during the winter. Still covered by this fee, and essentially.
this would only-
Basically, you gain about $600,000 a year after you take out the costs. But again, it moves everything off of the general fund. If you combine that, we have 2 options on the sales tax side. If you combined it with a 1/4-cent sales tax increase, because of the shortened period during which it would be collected next year, you're looking at about $775,000 for fiscal year 18-19. In a full year, that would be about $1.3 million based on current sales estimates. If you did the 1/4-cent sales tax alone, essentially all it would do is plug our current hole. You're still not going to buy much of anything. If you combined it with the solid waste fee, there would be some funds left for a very modest capital program in fiscal year 18-19, but moving forward beyond that, there would be additional funds available. I will say for me, any discussion of a sales tax is going to include addressing reserves. If we did a 1/2 cent I would advocate that it be written into the resolution that $250,000 a year of funds generated by that would go into reserves and would continue on an annual basis until we reached 120 days of operational reserve. And then it would continue to accrue as needed to maintain that level. If we went to a half-cent,
You said half cent, but
quarter cent was what I was discussing.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, if we went to a half-cent, a half-cent could stand on its own without a solid waste fee, in that it would provide for fiscal year 18-19 an estimated $1.55 million. Moving forward in a full year, that would be about $2.6 million. If the half cent is used, I would advocate placing $500,000 a year into reserves on the same basis until we reach 120 days of reserve. Again, to be added to annually as needed to, because your budget grows. And I would put a further caveat on that, in that I believe $200,000 should also be placed into the public building fund moving forward to address things like the need for new fire stations, new police stations, a new public works building, whatever that may be. But let's start putting some money back so that it's so that we actually have a fund to use to address those needs.
To accrue it.
Those are they're not complete thoughts, because there's a lot of details left in a solid waste fee to talk about. I haven't discussed this at all with Attorney Triggs to see if my thoughts are even doable. I assume that they are. But that's my current thinking. You could combine solid waste with either of them. But essentially, a solid waste fee, I think you're simply ceasing to absorb an ongoing, continuing cost. And by the way, with a solid waste fee, I would suggest that you put, much as there is with the water and sewer fee, a 3% escalator, so that it doesn't have to be continually reviewed and become a continual political football, because all you're doing essentially is turning solid waste into a enterprise fund. So, as I said, this isn't completely thought through, but that's kind of where I'm at. I wanted to at least offer it at some point so that we'd have a starting point to a conversation.
I like the designation of the reserves.
Just a question on the solid waste fee. Make sure there's no misunderstanding, because when this was brought up, Jeff, you said just last week it would not include an added value, which it meant yard waste. So is what I hear you saying, just to make sure everything's on the table and we're clear, a $15 a month fee would include garbage, recycle, and yard waste?
That's what's being discussed here.
Yeah, back there.
I just want to make sure, because I don't want something said and then a week later.
When I was talking last week, there's two things that I've done here. I left the host fee into the solid waste program, which I had pulled out last week. I'm much more comfortable with the cost associated with garbage and recycling, because we've got a long history of collection of both, so I know where that's at. I've got a lot less research and time into the yard waste. I can't tell you with 100% certainty that there's enough cost or revenue in this to cover yard waste being included into the process. At this point in time, I can't. This is a very educated guess and estimates in here, but I don't know the exact how many people will actually participate. It's with the brown paper bags. It's not in a toter system, so there's a lot of unknowns for me to definitely be able to put a definite figure on what our costs would be in operating a yard waste program.
May I ask Dennis what he thinks? Your impressions?
We are making some
to the mic.
Which Dennis, I guess, first.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you go to the mic, Dennis?
And I want to say that I've had long conversations with Dennis on this program, and Rick Simonsky as part of the process.
I understand.
I think the true guess here is we don't know how many people or how much yard waste we're going to be dealing with. So we have to kind of throw some numbers at it and say, okay, this will hopefully cover everything. We've talked about a different garbage truck to be able to utilize this service, one that would allow a consumer to use a toter if they choose, would also allow them to use brown paper bags for leaves, potentially go to something processed just like other cities do, where it has to be, any limbs have to be cut up in 3 foot and bounded with natural fiber so that you could absorb those in the process. But we really don't have a clue what those costs are going to be. If we have 1,000 people participate, I think our numbers are accurate. If we have every single household in the city of East Peoria participate for a 9-month program, we don't know. We don't know if that's going to be enough. I think our numbers incorporated a 9-month program as opposed to 6. So we have a little bit of extra of salary cost in there for a 9 months of an employee as opposed to 6. So that's better. But until we can kind of come up with the ideas to say, well, we want to start this April 1st and we want to quit November 31st, or however, whatever program we put into place, we want to try to make sure it encompasses what the public needs and wants. But we're really making some guesses on how do we limit that program. I've been doing a lot of research out there as to what some other communities do. Some of them do just single pickups type of a scenario where they do it for the month of April. They don't do it again for May, June, July. Then they pick it back up again in August, September when the leaves start to fall, and they concentrate on that. So some of it comes back to the direction of how you guys want us to try to implement this program, and we're going to have to guess. And yeah, truthfully, we might be here a year from now looking at you saying, $15 doesn't cover everything that we have in this thing because this is a phenomenally supported program. We're kind of making some guesses based on the improved amounts of recycling, which has helped reduce the cost of solid waste, increase the savings in recycling, and combine that up with just some numbers that we hope will cover it. I mean, realistically.
Dennis, what communities around us offer curbside?
The city of Pekin offers curbside. I know that because I was a resident there for 24 years. You put it out, they would take it.
You know what their rate of participation is?
I don't. I don't think, and then they have, you just put it out with your regular garbage and they do it from the same kind of months process. So I can only go by what I've seen through driving through town on the weeks, and you'll have people that bag every single week their yard and then yard waste, and then you'll have some people that don't ever participate. I never had a tree in my yard, but it seemed like I always seemed to get everybody else's leaves in my yard, so I had to collect those up and get rid of them, and I did what I could. Other communities, I know Morton does theirs more as a spring cleanup type of scenario where they do it in a different spot. Tremont does a spot where they offer the community a place to bring leaves and dump them and without bags so that they can compost them and further get rid of them. So we've kind of tried to cover every gamut. We started off with the opportunity of a place to be able to bring stuff, and then that's kind of evolved into curbside. That's involved into different kinds of trucks to make the curbside work better. Like I said, we're just trying to make our best educated guess realistically.
Dennis, I know in the community where my daughter lives, it's not in Illinois, when they do yard waste, and I believe they may only do it in the fall, I'm not certain. Basically, you get your leaves to the curb and they send the Vector truck.
That's what Eureka does too. Is it the same type of Vector truck, Dennis, or is it different?
I don't know, to be honest with you. I've seen ones that are not. They're more of like a street sweeper style, where they'll come by with just the vacuum part of a street sweeper. A lot of the street sweepers nowadays aren't necessarily brushes and vacs underneath them. They're actually just big vacuum cleaners that you're driving. So a lot of those are utilized for that process, for you get them to the curb, they just come by and suck them up as they drive around. Of course, that also comes with you still got to get it out of the street sweeper and into another vehicle to be disposed of somehow. A lot of times street sweepers got to have, a truck or a dump truck to go with it to be able to haul this out. Otherwise, you're traveling your street sweeper a long way away to get rid of it too. So, and I've looked. I've got one of the vendors had dropped off just a flyer that showed a combination of a dump truck with an arm on it that would actually reach and be able to pick up the equipment, back to similar to like our arm trucks where they'd be able to reach out, grab it, put it into a dump truck style bed. You know, if we're going to look at yard waste, might be an option to look at that. However, it gets away from being able to handle a toters type of scenario. So, you know, the idea would be is if we do a rear load garbage truck, would have a toter capability on it. So if a customer wants to have a toter for yard waste, they could do that. Put it right alongside their other 3 toters. Our guys would be able to grab it, dump it in the toter, put it back on the curb, drive down the street. Would be no problem. If they chose to bag it in the paper bags, so be it. They would be able to handle those, throw them into the back of the truck. If they bundled them, we'd be able to accommodate that with a rear load truck. We can't really accommodate that with the trucks we have right now. So
Just a question in regards to yard waste. Currently, Waste Management, do they have a contract with the city to offer that service to our citizens? Because I do know, you know, we looked into it at one time, it's a nominal amount of citizens that actually utilize their service, and quite honestly, when you talk to people, it's because they feel it's pretty costly. And we allow open burning and whatnot, so they don't see a need to it. Is there a contract in place with Waste Management, or if we implemented our own, how does that work?
I think the biggest key to the waste management piece is it kind of comes back to, from what I understand, of the disposal property that's available in the Peoria side. So right now there's a vendor that has a landfill site that takes this yard waste. Waste Management has a site that is not currently in operation. However, that's one of the big keys that we have to work out is we don't have any of the fees set up with this landscaping place to be able to even take our waste. If we said, go ahead, we're going to do it, we've got to get those conversations underway to say, what are you going to charge me? What's it going to cost us? Can we put this into place to help reduce costs? And the piece that we're looking at too is to make sure that if this place in Peoria closed, we have a place to take it, because we are now responsible for this yard waste. We don't want to get to the point where something happens and the Peoria spot we have to eliminate it goes away, and now I'm having to truck this stuff to Champaign or having to truck this stuff somewhere else just to get rid of yard waste. We don't want to be back here having the same disagreement to say, you know, now we're taking all this stuff and we don't have a place to put it. So we've got to vet a lot of that out in the process.
I guess my question specifically with Waste Management, are we breaching some type of contract should we decide to offer this service ourselves? I didn't know if there's...
John, my contract with Waste Management.
It's between you and...
Yeah, but
okay.
I
just want to make sure the city
when codes are
wasn't...
written, we have to allow them.
I was going to say, did we
to
help
pick-
establish a price?
Well, not necessarily a price, but we have to allow Waste Management to come and do that service. I'm not sure that's done in contract.
Dennis?
I don't think we have a contract with Waste Management. I've never seen it.
Okay.
Never been discussed.
But there is a provision in your code that says you have to have a licensed hauler and some other stuff to even offer that service in town.
I just didn't want to have a premature conversation and then we decide we go this route and offer this service and then find out, oh, whoops.
There's only a couple hundred people taking it.
Follow-up question I thought we were going to get to, that is, can you preclude somebody from...
That was next.
Driving up and down the streets to collect waste?
That was my next question.
They assume for a moment that they're already paying a fee.
Correct.
The city will do it. Can you preclude a private contractor from doing that? And not looked at that, haven't really thought about that. But what I do know is that many municipalities do not do the solid waste collection in-house. They regulate it by only allowing one vendor. And so I'm getting signals from the hallway.
Oh.
Sorry. Municipalities, and actually, to be more specific, I'm thinking about Bartonville years ago. It was a big deal to go out for bids for a private contractor to bid to do all of the solid waste collection within a municipality, and you had the authority as a non-home rule municipality to limit it to just one vendor, because you didn't want one house here having one vendor come pick up solid waste, then the house next door another one, and the one next door another one, so you got 3 times the heavy traffic on your street. So by analogy, my preliminary thought is that you could preclude private vendors from picking up solid waste if somebody for some reason wanted to pay them even though they're being charged a fee for a service you were offering.
Dennis, just to take that thought on a little bit of a tangent, if we can preclude a private enterprise from doing that, can we charge a franchise fee for the right to do it?
Yes.
So if Waste Management wanted, if we so chose, we could charge Waste Manager or whomever the provider may be a franchise fee for the right to do recycling collection within the city.
Well, I have to be careful. I think you can, but I don't know how far you can go. I'm not sure you can go beyond some reasonable connection to the cost of administering that. I don't know if you can make it a serious revenue source.
You say
I don't know.
recycling or
That could just
increase?
just
You said recycling.
yard
Okay,
waste.
just yard waste,
Just
okay.
yard waste.
That would increase the cost to pick up. Probably would.
I have waste management, $190 a year. You can't go anything less than a year. And quite honestly, the spring and the fall, there are more days or more weeks where we have nothing to pick up, excluding those time periods. My neighbors are the same way.
It's,
Grass clippings, is, you know, if you don't.
Mayor, you're paying $190 a year, and the numbers we received back this last year from Waste Management, that in the 61611 zip code, there were 251 yard waste customers. That's less than 5% of our city in zip code 61611. So the mayor chooses it, and that's good. And many residents all have different needs, different landscape, different, whether it's trees, leaves, or none, you know. And I guess my view is that we have a mega million deficit right now over capital needs. Now, if we can incorporate some of these things in the future into a service that we provide as part of its own enterprise, maybe it works. But we don't know what the EPA is going to do. We don't have long-term where we may be able to dump or even make available a place to take your yard waste or leaves or whatever. And that's some big question marks. Our immediate need is to cover our general fund current services that we have, which is solid waste and recycle. I know the glass aspect of it. We have that given today, and what's nice about that, from what I've understood, and I think this has been talked about before, is because we have the transfer station, Waste Management can offer that as a, I'll call it a free service for us. If we have the type of truck, they can unload and separate the glass from the recycle. What that does is two things. It allows our citizens to use recycle as a viable option, which we've talked about for several years. Number two, it takes all that extra weight out of the solid waste that goes to landfill, which we're charged a much higher rate per ton to dump that in the landfill. So it becomes a cost savings for us on our tipping fees to the landfill to have glass taken out and put into the recycle area. If we can get that done for free, that pays for our truck or trucks. And that was an option we've been looking at, and I'm sure Commissioner Decker knows he's been working on that, and I'm aware of it because it does affect Public Works. But I know we need to get this part of it right. If we can somehow incorporate lawn waste or yard waste, okay, but when you look at the cost, it's if it was just simply a stack of what we're proposing for solid waste and we add a yard waste fee like Waste Management, that's doubling the amount that we're looking for revenue.
Personally, I think it's time we look at yard waste. I think that every progressive community I know of does it. I think the smoke in the room, the elephant in the room, so to speak, is to stop burning. I think that would be one way to do it. And I think we should make every effort to keep our air clean and to pick up yard waste personally.
I agree.
And I understand yard waste is the wild card part of this, but we need to vet it a little further, obviously. And as I said, my comments are very preliminary, but I think yard waste has to be part of the conversation. And to me, it would be a value added that would make this more worthwhile for everybody.
But I don't think any of us would want to see yard waste double the cost of our solid waste recycle pickup.
I don't think so.
I don't see that it would.
I mean, but we've not really had a chance to verify what it might be. There's an economy of scale. We do everything. I mean, we have the drivers, we have the employees, we have the trucks, we can do it. We're not coming in separate. West Peoria has 3 different waste haulers come into their subdivisions to pick up solid waste. We don't want that.
So with comparable communities, for example, let's use Morton, what are their fees? Because they offer a variety of services, and I'm just curious, if we're going to be set on $15 a month, what's included in that $15 a month? I mean, if you're going to sit there and tell me that, and I understand recycling now, we absorb those costs, back that out of it. Back out yard waste. Is solid waste alone, is that, we're going to go back to citizens who've been paying property taxes forever and saying, hey, for $15 extra a month, now we're just going to pick up your garbage. Can't do that. I would never support that. It'd have to be something value added that makes sense.
I don't think the value added thing is you have to apologize for, because there's been no increase in property taxes in over 10 years.
You don't want to go down that road, because
And I'll go down that road.
Sales tax.
And I'll go down, no sir, and
That does.
I wish I could speak, please. We stated earlier in this meeting that when the city lost and the landfill closed, Farmville's landfill closed, city's expenses went up tremendously. We did get a transfer station. We received taxes from Waste Management for that transfer station. But we cannot continue to go on with 0% increase even for the cost and rate of inflation to lock in your 2000 or 1990 rate and say that's all we're ever going to pay. That's all I'm ever expected to pay as a homeowner is what I paid back 25 years ago. You can't go that way. You've got to be responsible for how you administer, and be fair and be as low cost a provider as you can. We are a lower cost provider than if we were to farm it out. Morton does not provide solid waste pickup. They farm that out, and it keeps their property tax rate low because it's pushed off onto a private hauler. People in Morton can choose to have it picked up, or they can choose to haul it and drop it off at a drop-off point. I kind of like that option myself. You'd have either one, but that's up to the homeowner.
Personally, we kicked this down the road for the last 2 years. We should have the answers right now as to what's it going to cost, what the proposals are, and to let it delay any further, I think, is not responsible. We should have the answers.
I agree with you, Mayor, 100%. We've talked about this for a long time. We talked about it last budget year, we talked about the year before and the year before that. And I'm very much in favor of the sales tax. Again, when you go back and look at, we're looking at $4 to $6 million a year minimum of what we could spend on the capital fund and the general fund annually. Quarter-cent sales tax won't get it done. And if you look at the half-cent, yes, $2.6 million. If you combine that with the garbage fee at 1.6, that gets you at 4.2, but then that does free up cash from solid waste to go back into perhaps streets or other city services. So it's not just a cost shifting totally, it actually frees up cash for other things. I think that's what I would tell people. Look, the cost advantage, if we go with the garbage fee, it frees up cash in the general fund for more money put in the streets. It helps us to have more of a capital control over our solid waste and recycle program. May include yard waste once we get all that out. The thing about the sales tax is that's calendar driven by the state of Illinois when we can jump in and actually approve that and get it in place. We kicked that down the road, Mayor, last year, 6 months, by saying we weren't going to do it a year ago. We knew we had exactly these same needs 6 months ago to a year ago.
Let's zero in. Is there a notion by 3 or more commissioners to look at this value-added yard waste in combination with the solid waste?
I would like to see it, sir.
I would, quite honestly, and I asked the question very directly, and it sounds like the answer from Commissioner Jeffers is separate from what I heard City Administrator Mr. Eater say, which is this $15 a month would cover this. I understand we're not going to know a true cost for a while, and maybe you come back in adjustment. But what I'm hearing you say is the $15 a month shouldn't include yard waste and whatnot. So, for me to support anything, and I'm just going to say this, I'll just be as direct as I always am. 3 years ago, when I came on board here, I was very critical of some decisions. I'm not going to rehash them. This conversation needed to happen, honestly, 3 years ago. I'm glad it's happening. I really am. I am glad, and I know the employees are nervous as heck about what's coming, and I get it, but it's sad to me that it took to get to this point before people start having real conversations. And by that, I mean, are we covering our costs, yes or no? If we're not, what are we doing about it? Here's what I said to Commissioner Densberger earlier today, because maybe a surprise to all, but I had actually reached out to Mr. Becker to go over the sales tax and weigh the different options, because from a budget standpoint, we are at the bottom of the barrel. There's a couple areas that I personally think we can improve on, and one of them's take-home vehicles, but according to Mr. Eder, there wasn't a consensus across the board of this council on how to do that, so that got shuffled off the table. But I think overall, looking at what all the departments and Mr. Eder have come back with, is a bare-bones budget. By that, this is what it costs to operate. This is where we're at today. We have no money. We all have equipment needs. Everybody turn in their capital improvement plans as requested. It's huge. We're not fixing streets. We haven't fixed streets in how long? Even back, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago when Commissioner Decker convinced the council to borrow funds for the next 2 years, an advancement of funds. That wasn't enough to cover it. I mean, we're kidding ourselves. But to go through this exercise, I hate to say it, I'm glad we did it, because this day's been coming for years, and to think that it hasn't, you're crazy. Here's what I said to Commissioner Densberger. The problem I have with coming forward and just saying, hey, yeah, let's do a 0.5% sales tax. Are we done with the, I'm sorry, ignorant decision-making? By that, ERI, are we done making decisions on things that we don't have money for? Or be used? Streets, equipment. That's a commitment that I would want if I were to support it. I mean, I feel like I've, sit up here and I've been critical. I have solutions, but on the flip side of it, I'm not gonna throw out $2.5 million and use it as a candy jar. That's just my personal opinion, and I'm sure people think I'm a jerk for my comments, but it is what it is.
You're saying, Commissioner, that it has to be designated and assurance is going to go where?
100%.
Which I agree. So
Whether it's quarter, a half, or the garbage fee.
I agree. 3 people, I would like to see this yard waste explored. And I heard Commissioner Densberger.
I would definitely like to see it explored.
And I'd like the council to direct that to be done with an answer coming back.
I'd like to talk about this too. I haven't had an opportunity yet. First of all, we did this exercise a couple of years ago. I believe the exact dollar that we thought that our service cost per month was about $17.56.
Yeah.
This exercise was done, and we were very detailed in the number that we came up with. That's the number that we believe it currently costs per month. And I think that's what Commissioner Jeffers is saying. He's concerned that by adding more, I guess, services to it, that the true costs will increase. Now, there is an other side to that. The other side is we have decreased the number of personnel we've had since then, so we are, I guess, a more cost-effective service overall. Mr. Eder is talking about going to an every other week recycling program with toter, and that will also streamline and make our overall service quite a bit less expensive. So the question is, will $15 a month cover everything? I'm not sure. I think that the last conversation I had with Rick Szymanski, he was kind of stuck in not knowing where to start in finding a place to take our recycling material, because Waste Management has their own facilities to take theirs. So to wonder how much...
Or yard waste.
The yard waste. I'm not sure what he said, sorry.
To recycling.
Thank you.
Yard waste.
Thank you, yard waste. Not sure where we would take ours. I'm sure we can come up with something. The question is how much it will cost. So that we do have to find that out for sure before we make a decision on this. I think everybody's owed that. There have been some, I disagree about the ERI, and I think recently it's shown there's possibly a good decision. But I believe we are at where it costs to operate, and I think that adding the service, the additional service, is what Commissioner Jeffers is concerned about. I'm not opposed to that. I have been cautious, opposed to a garbage fee of any kind. But I don't want to be naive, and I don't want to be closed-minded. I want to do the right thing, so I will listen and I will consider it. It has to, there are a couple questions we have to answer. How are we going to get rid of the materials I mentioned, and how are we going to pick it up? The only service, back when we talked about a few years ago, and I think when Don first brought it up, I envisioned a specific truck. And when he mentioned the Vector truck, I don't know if it was that type of truck or a different type of truck that goes around town, sucks up the material, and therefore I think mulches it and kind of makes it easier to get rid of. I don't know if that's what we should be doing or if it's bagging or what, but we have to answer those two questions to figure out if the garbage fee, the yard waste is something we need to consider. As far as the fee goes, the reason that I have been so cautious about agreeing to it is it is such a large fee directly on the taxpayer. We have not increased costs like we should have along the way. And where you can see that is our streets. As John mentioned, I'll talk about that in depth next week. Our streets have been the area that's deteriorated. Now, not just our streets. Look at our, we haven't bought a plow truck in 4 years, obviously. Police cars and fire trucks and ambulances and our other service trucks that we all need. This is how we've absorbed those costs. We've not purchased things we needed, and we haven't fixed the buildings like we should have. Saying all that, as opposed to a garbage fee as I am, I will consider it. I would personally rather consider an incremental increase so as to not overwhelm the taxpayers. Having said that, though, $15 at the end of that increment might not be the right amount, and that's why I want to find out what that garbage fee will, I'm sorry, what the yard waste fee will actually cost. So I think, yes, I'm in favor of exploring it, Mayor. I think it has to be explored, though, with the sales tax, and I'm personally a half a cent. The reason is because that's the least impact to the taxpayer of East Peoria for the biggest financial benefit to the city of East Peoria.
Just transition just perfectly to the part. It sounds like we have agreement as far as not to adopt a solid waste fee, but to look at it. Now we look at the thoughts regarding a half or a quarter-cent sales tax. And yours is a half-cent. Right?
Mayor, I think that if we're going to do it, we don't want to do something now and in 2 years come back and have to ask for more. We want to make the right decision. We still have 10 years left on the agreement we've made with the school district. That money has gone to good use, and our students are better served because of it. But until then, that money is out there. I think everybody knows me in here. I would consider even more than that. I wouldn't want to put us at a competitive disadvantage as our surrounding communities. Half a cent does not do that. Any more than that, and it would put us slightly above our surrounding communities. So as much as I would consider more than that, and if we did more than half a cent, whether it be 3/4 or a full cent, we wouldn't need to worry or consider the garbage fee. But for each quarter-cent increase, it would mean to the city of East Peoria somewhere around, what is it, $1 to $1.5 million.
Commissioner, would you support the strict regulation how those funds should be spent?
Oh, absolutely. It's a shame that we are now operating on about $300,000 in our reserves. I look at Washington a few years ago. We're coming into tornado season, fellas. That's scary. If something happened, we can always get the money, I guess, but it would be better to have the reserves where we need it to be. Absolutely, as Commissioner Densberger said, at a half a cent sales tax, I would absolutely agree to $500,000 a year going into our reserves. And I don't even know if I'd stop it. And you didn't say stop it, what, $2 or $3 million, but I would make sure that we have plenty. Years ago, when I was first on the council, an accountant stated how much a city should have in reserves. I wanted to say it was like, is it 180 days?
It's
120 to 180 days.
Okay.
So 120 would be the minimum, but, you know, you could certainly get to that, and it would probably take, what, 4 years?
5.
5
Years was our original estimate.
That's where I would try to land, Mayor.
And just something Commissioner just said, Mr. Triggs, I don't believe we have the legislative authority to go above a half cent. Is that correct?
We can, as long as it's a quarter increments, yes, we can do 75 cents, as long as it's a quarter increments.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Jeffers, you won the floor.
I'll take my turn whenever you want. Give it to me, Mayor. Let me back up on the solid waste yard. I'll definitely be in favor of exploring that. You and I have talked about this. I am. I just was raising the flag that, you know, it is ironic to me as we've been to try and hold costs down at $10 a year, $20 a year of residents, that we have some wanting to add more expenses to our program, and I was just trying to hold back and say, look, if we count the cost, if it's a value item and for yard waste, I think we can do it. And Commissioner Decker's right, we have reduced our cost in that area by quite a bit, actually. There's been a higher productivity the last couple of years, and so we can maybe give that benefit back to the citizens at really no cost, but we have to have a chance to really evaluate that. I have along with Commissioner Decker, would advocate for the half-cent sales tax, which on a $4,000 purchase per year, in addition to fuel and medicines and grocery food, it's, what, $40 a year?
No,
$20 a year.
On $5,000 is $25 a year.
On $4,000, it's $20 a year for someone spending $4,000. So that's a pretty low amount, and about 80%, 75 to 80% of that total revenue comes from outside the city. We take advantage of our sales tax. You know, I've been called ignorant for a lot of things, and I'll probably be more so later, but I think it is rather low of Commissioner Call to refer to anyone who's supported ERI as being ignorant. That was a program that was put upon us, and we did support it as a council, and as was determined, we were given information that they thought it would have about a 5-year payback. And we thought that would be worst case, and we were hopeful of that until we had all the numbers in. And as it came out, they were right. The numbers we were given by our admins was it's less than 5-year payout. And our treasurer, Jeff Becker, has said so. After 4.5 years, we are making money on the early retirement offers. So to me, after 3 years of being beat up on this issue, I would hope we could put that to rest again. It turned out to be a good thing for us. And I think the sales tax increase and these other cost-cutting measures we've done, Public Works has come forward with several $100,000 of cost savings. And I know capital expenses, and I don't know if Commissioner Cog and the others can express how they're going to pay for their capital expenses. But our capital expenses as a group is $4.5, $5, $6 million a year. And some lot of unknowns plus the reserves. So by all means, Mayor, I would consider going with the solid waste in conjunction with the sales tax to generate $3.5 million a year. That would get us in a position with some additional growth. And we talked about this 8-year trough that we're in. I think we got to look at the next 10 years, 8 years that we're at, as development revenue increases. That's what we're trying, in my view, that's what I'm trying to fill. And is this 8 to 10 year trough that we're at, brought about by an increase in pension costs, a decrease in gaming, which those two combined have decreased our revenue by $3 to $4 million annually. That is not stupid spending on our part. That has been a mandated expense for the pensions. The reduction in gaming was not any of our doing. It just meant less revenue for us to have for our budget. And I think we have done a good job to take out the gaming from our general fund budgeting, and it needs to stay out and be used for capital or development costs, in my view. But I will support that, Mayor, in all haste, especially that we don't miss the date on the sales tax. To get that vote taken care of, if we can get the solid waste in line as well, maybe at the same time, that's fine. But we have to take care of the sales tax before this next deadline by Springfield.
Thank you. Commissioner Call, you made a statement
just-
about what you would support your plan.
Yeah, just I want to back up because I'm going to make Mr. Becker sweat. By that, I mean to sit there in a public meeting and say that the RI was a wise decision and it was going to pay for itself in 5 years was premature, and I'll tell you why. I've challenged the numbers then. I challenged the numbers today. I've asked for actual numbers. Those didn't include all the costs associated with the RI. So we're not there yet. So mark my words. At the end of the day, to spend $2.5 million you don't have when we had $400,000 in reserves 2 years ago. Now we're at $300,000. Not much has changed there. We've had no money. We bought police cars last year. Nothing else. This year, nothing. My whole point in saying ignorant decisions is I'm not going to sit here and put our businesses, which I'll argue with anyone up here because my company went through this similar process out of Carroll Spring for 2-3 years in a row, where 1/4% or 0.5% in some businesses puts you at a major disadvantage. When you're in a business with low margins, it affects it. You win business or you lose business. So to me, to sit here and get to this point, I can tell you it took a lot. And my point is, I'm not going to support any additional revenue stream if I can't get a commitment on how those funds are going to be spent.
What would you propose, Commissioner?
So I would like to look at all three options that we have here. But in order to support any option, it would have to be 100% committed.
I don't think you have a disagreement from
Yeah,
most.
don't either. But
For me,
I hear you, but you took exception to the ERI, and I'm telling you, those numbers that you guys presented, whenever that was, a couple months ago, those aren't accurate.
How do you say they're not accurate, though?
We've got to
They don't include all the costs that are associated with the
We're
ERI.
not going to agree. We've got to steer the ship now in an appropriate manner to serve the people.
Well, I'd just like to know what he's saying.
Mr. Becker, would you like to allude to, not to put you on the spot, but you're the treasurer.
You're fine.
He's on the spot.
So the numbers we looked at are what the difference in salary was from the employees that left versus the difference in salary of the employees that we have now. And what Commissioner Call is alluding to is we did not have the time yet or look at what was the increased costs for healthcare. We added 20 employees to the retirement plan. They're still in healthcare. You bring in 20 new employees. How many of those took insurance? What's the increased cost to the city for that? There's also savings that go into it. You had employees with 5 weeks vacation. You bring a new employee into Public Works and their contract, they don't get vacation. All of those details have not been put into it yet. It's something I talked to Commissioner Call about and something we're going to work on as time allows. This was right around the budget time. I haven't had time to dig into that further. I'm going to work with Teresa Durham and try to look at each individual and see what insurance costs. Do we have somebody go off with a family? Do they come on as a single? I mean, there's a lot of details. Each individual person that came and went has to be looked at to get a true savings cost, and I think that's what you're referring to.
We got to kind of be careful because there's statements that come out both ways. At one time, it's like, this is going to pay for itself in 5 years. We say, man, that's astonishing.
That's why I say it's premature, that's all.
And the other time, we don't have it. So it's a work in progress, I guess.
I will say, though,
Right.
to say that it's going to pay for itself in 5 years is the same comment made to us by the city administrator and the treasurer prior to voting on it. So that's why when he brought this forward, and actually for a year, the Jeffs, both of them felt like it was a bad decision. And then a few months ago when they looked at the numbers, all of a sudden it looked quite a bit better, which mirrored the comments that Tom Grimberry and Terry Galande had said. So,
Well, there's a reason why it's looking better versus what was presented before. There are 2 positions in Public Works which were never contemplated being eliminated that are not in Public Works today that were impacted. One was the Water Department came to Dennis as the director of that department at that time, and then to Steve and ultimately to myself, and said we can do this job with 3 employees instead of 4. So that's one position. As the reorganization in Public Works, I've worked with Steve and then ultimately now Dennis, and we eliminated 1 supervisor position in there So, you know, you look at those two positions, that's a lot of savings that was never planned for, that we have taken out of Public Works. I'll question some of it long-term, whether we don't add one back or add something else back at a little different position. But there's been changes in the structure of that department, and two full positions. Now, grant you, the one is on the enterprise fund side, but it was impacted by the ERI. They did have people on the water side leave by ERI, and as we know, some of those people that left, we actually had to pay as much, if not more, to get replacements in because of the skill set needed. Finding water operators and wastewater operators is not an easy.
Just about that, and let me explain why. That's special legislation that we lobbied for lack of a kinder term, a long time ago, and it wasn't real popular with the Department of Revenue. It got approved. Nobody else quite has the same prerogative, other non-home rule municipalities. And when we adopt a quarter, in increments of a quarter, an increase in sales tax, we send that to the Department of Revenue. It's looked at by their attorneys, presumed perhaps the Attorney General's office, I don't know, and they have to approve that resolution. And I think the legislation suggests to us the format of that resolution. If we deviate from that and add a caveat that this money as a matter of law, not just a city council ordinance, but as a matter of law as part of the approval process for the sales tax incremental increase, where there would be trouble, there would be in the Department of Revenue and their attorneys by the fact that we had this add-on. And I don't know the answer to that. One would think that maybe they don't care, but on the other hand, they may not like the novelty of what we presented to them. What you can do, of course, absolutely, is you as a council can impose whatever limitations that you want. And you can be as graphic, as clear, as dramatic as you want to be. That this money can never be used for any purpose that push $250,000 or $500,000 except going into a reserve. I mean, you can say that. And I think the very direct about this, you can say it in such a fashion that for a subsequent council to undo that would be draw a lot of attention and be very controversial and a very difficult vote. That we can do. So internally, we can make it very difficult for somebody to deviate from the restrictions that are imposed as to the use of the money. Can we do that as a matter of law and actually condition revenue's approval of the collection of the quarter cent or half cent, whatever it is, sales tax as a matter of law beyond the control of the future city council, I don't know.
So
They
long-
probably won't know unless we ask and submit something to them.
But so long as we could do it, not necessarily in that resolution, but in a separate resolution or something, providing guidance as to how it's spent, we can do that.
Absolutely can do that, and I think you can make it very difficult and very challenging for it to be undone.
Okay.
Commissioner Disberger, we have principles there in our strategic planning session about the importance of reserves. I mean, we can go back to that document, which may not be binding, but that was the will of this council.
I would be more interested in making it as binding as possible moving forward.
So it sounds like we're at a point where we need to stop, think.
I would like to throw one other thing out there, Mayor. As far as revenue goes, I will give Mr. Dunsbury credit, who quite a while ago mentioned a rule. And I think in a perfect world, the city made it over. It would allow us to do some of the things that we are supposed to do and talk to extensively about, obviously, sales stuff, but people that come to see this Peoria to eat and drink, we could talk about as we do their sales tax being so successful. I know that would be gas tax. Having said that, residents dominate the market. I think that Peoria is the most recent one. I'm very concerned with the field of the current year. I think we have really being able to get that area maybe a very good community and maybe something we could do. But I think that those are avenues that would, like sales tax, if you get people from outside of the city of Peoria pay for some part of it, very important. And we don't have to put the burden on the taxpayer in Peoria, that we can get people who food out here to pay for some of the food items for the state future. And that's very important to me. So, Commissioner Dunsberger, if there's a way to do that, do it in the future. That might then allow us to back up in there. Having said that, I think it's power right now, and I think to do that right now, it would take some time to give them credit. I think that we do the best thing before. Unfortunately, some will give some authorities that people are afraid of things like that. I think that we all have expressed
Detail on the solid waste fee. Details such as whether it's viability, it's practicality, how it works, how many bags are you going to pick up on a weekly basis on a waste
The other question is, are we going to limit the number of garbage cans we're going to empty? Today, you're allowed to set out 3.
Well, but all those are the details that we need before we make this decision.
Sales tax.
As far as the sales tax, what is the drop dead date on it? Passing it from the state.
Isn't it like July or something, and it's got to be
Start in July. It's,
March 31st.
no, it's March 31st has to be to the state in order to start July 1.
So we would need to make that decision before the end of March.
You're looking at the different categories where that money will be allocated to specifically.
And I think Mr. Triggs will advise us as to how we can allocate that money.
I only see 3 categories, honestly. I know everybody would say reserves, number one, which was discussed and was a priority for everybody on this council.
So
Number 2 would be roads, and then capital expenses. Capital improvements.
The one thing that I have cautioned you a little bit in there is, we've got to balance the budget first. So
Yeah, we got that 500,000.
we've got the 500,000, and I will also tell you there are an additional $200,000 of costs, so that I would say that we needed to add back in and over that 500,000 to have a truly working budget. Essentially, we cut all computers, miscellaneous computers that we didn't have to buy or replace. We've got them on a 4-year type replacement cycle. If we don't buy hardware, buy some other stuff, we're going to be getting way behind on.
So that 200,000 is in relation to those?
Most of it is in relation to that, and I can share this with council, but I just wanted you guys to know there are other things that I cut out of the budget to get us to this point as a, quote, desperation, trying to cut to where it was really painful. I think I've had 3 of you said, I don't know how you could live with X, cut out the budget. So I would like to work with those in addition to the happening that we have to. We've got the council meeting next week, which I'm going to have a working session on streets. Dan's going to give us an update on streets. There should be some time to that for us to talk as well. Yeah, we're going to have a longer session. We can briefly talk. I doubt if we'll be ready on the garbage stuff that quickly. At least 2 weeks we could come back between February 13th, which is the second. I'm done with that. If we can put together that quickly, if not, then I would say, well, the following after that would be another council meeting. What time is our pleasure? We have an alternate. You want to do the light sport park? You want to start at order? Good discussion. Okay.
Okay.
There was kind of maybe a 2 or 4 of them.
Okay.
If there was, we didn't want to infringe upon somebody else's community. So the first round, I think $330,000, they were talking about making money. Or they were calling that a lot of people utilize these services once it's implemented citywide. At least 1,000 kind of value hours, and I'm sure they're doing it more or less than that. So I'm assuming that they're going to look at a couple thousand people.
Yeah, the way I look at it, if he offered it, I would never, honestly, never been a proponent of the open burning. I would go away, you would see them taking people utilizing the service.
I think people utilize them too, but they're not true about the new time in the future to see if we're going to go on this. That's the time.
I think what several different people coming in there, well, if I say, you want that $15 profit, not anyway, not you don't need so much money, but the thing is, you add that on top. A lot of them, I'm going to assume they're real. So, I mean, you can say, well, if they go to Peoria, they're going to have to pay it. But if they play hopscotch, you're going to have a lot of billing out for $15 a pop, in addition to the water, which they used, okay, that you're not going to be able to collect. And the other side is you're talking $15 like it's peanuts. Well, it is. It ain't much money. But you take a multitude of these people out here that's on fixed incomes, and I mean lower fixed incomes. Now you start throwing an extra $200, $180 if you get right down to 15, on top of whatever else they got to do. They're going to be somewhere between a rock and a hard spot. Social Security gives you $3 a year. They turn right around and take $285 back for Medicare or whatever they decide to take. Okay, and some pension plans are great. They just give you a cost of living and things go on. Other people have pension plans that don't pay a cost of living. Okay, and so that's going to put some of them between a rock and a hard spot. And just like you said about raising the sales tax, it's fair. Everybody has to pay it, okay? I mean, if you're a millionaire, you buy something for $1,000, you pay the sales tax. If you're a pauper, you pay it one way or the other. I agree with you on that. But the other side of it is, you keep betting on the come. All these people is going to come. If and when you put gas tax with your home rule, and the this tax, and the restaurant tax, and the that tax, there ain't nothing says that them people from Champaign have to come down here and watch them baseball games at Eastside. There's nothing says they got to come. Okay, so you're betting on the come. You better bet on the reality, what's here. That's my opinion. We got something else, and we all got one. Okay, but you're just keep wanting to add on, and I understand. You got to balance the books, okay? But I don't know what to tell you, but people don't, first of all, they don't have to stay here. Second of all, they don't have to come here. So I don't know how you're going to hit a happy medium, guys, but you better think about it a little before you just start throwing this 15 here, 20 there, this and that, and whatever, you know. Because it's your house, if you got 10 grand a month coming in, it's best to live within that 10 grand, right? I don't know what to tell you to do. Well, I do, like you said, John, but ain't nobody wants to hear it.
So I just will hush up and sit down.
Thank you very much, Bob. Good points. Anybody else? Come on up, Charlie. Nice hat, Charlie.
I'm going to go down this list pretty quickly, but there will be a couple of questions I'm going to hang up. From what I hear, we need 3 to 4 million in reserves. We had that at one time.